Speaking of Cults podcast is presented solely for general informational, educational, and entertainment purposes. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from it is at the user's own risk. The views, information, or opinions expressed by the host and guests are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute medical or other professional advice. Hello and welcome to the Speaking of Cults podcast. This is Chris Shelton, your host. Thank you very much for joining me again this week. I am welcoming back Pamela Nickel Williams, and she is the author of Clearly Lies Are True. It's a title that is very, very interesting, and this is a Scientology memoir. This is, a memoir that has Scientology in it, I should say. And Pamela, this is Pamela's story, and this has been recently published. Y'all can get it out there. We will talk about this book today. We have had Pamela on before and discussed some of her Scientology journey and upbringing, but we're going to go there again. So, Pam, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Chris. I always love talking to you, so thank you for having me back.
Absolutely. And I am a big fan of people getting their story out there. When we talked before, this was just a sort of work in progress. Now the book is out there. I hope y'all are checking it out. There was a sort of a clip from it on Tony Ortega's blog recently, and it's quite an interesting story. I myself enjoyed the read and thought, wow, what a lot to happen to a kid. Because you had a lot happen to you, and it was all kind of intermixed with Scientology stuff. Do we want to maybe start with the sort of overview view of that, as far as maybe the sort of what was your general experience with, growing up around Scientology and even L. Ron Hubbard direct influence on your family and this kind of thing?
Sure. So kind of a synopsis is what I'll give you.
Little bit, don't tell them everything because we want them to read the book.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. So my story is so different from so many ex-Scientologists who have told their stories. And part of the uniqueness of my story is that my parents were early followers of Scientology, that they were connected with Hubbard, with the Dianetics Foundation in Wichita. That's where my dad started. And then they followed L. Ron Hubbard and Mary Sue to the Church of Scientology in Washington, D.C. And they were there from 1957 to 1959 during the very early stages of Scientology. And so at that time, it was the Hubbard Association of Scientologists. And it was just getting going. So it was a small, I've used that word before, kind of grassroots movement, but it was small. It hadn't really grown to the size that, we had in the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
So the Hazy. You don't hear about the Hazy anymore.
The Hazy. You don't hear about it. You don't.
No, now it's the IAS. Yeah. But back in the day, it was originally the membership organization was the Hazy.
Yeah, exactly. So they were even before the I. They were just the has, yeah. So they were very active. I mean, in writing my book, I did a lot of research, and I found old Ability magazines, which were the magazine of the time in Scientology, and they are listed there. They were part of the conventions. They called them congresses, and they participated in all of that. So they were very involved in the early stages of Scientology. Mm. And then Hubbard left and he went to St. Hill and went to the UK, and they chose not to follow, and many people chose not to follow, and they stayed back in the US. And so my parents moved and followed a couple, John and Millie Galusha. And I know if anybody's listened to the Goldstein interviews, Mike Goldstein, who was very involved with the Galushas in Denver and that area, in your neck of the woods. But So anyway, so my parents followed them there because the franchise was opening there, and they weren't going to follow Hubbard to St. Hill. So I grew up in Scientology in that my parents still continued to practice in Denver. And then we moved many times throughout my childhood. always with the intention of continuing with Scientology. There were periods of time where I write about my mother's probably need to separate us from Scientology, her want, her desire to pull us away, and my father's push to keep us involved. So that's
Mhm.
really at the crux of my story as a child growing up in Scientology. And so my mother was always also the problem. She was the person that my father decided always needed to be fixed. And if you know anything about Scientology, that's how they rope you in, is that you have a ruin, you have a something that you're trying to fix, you're trying to make better. And you just keep having to go through more training and more auditing and spend more and more and more money. And that's what happened to my parents. So we lived in the suburbs of the South for a while. During that period of time, my mother and my little brother and I traveled to St. Hill so that my mother could take the St. Hill briefing course when that came out in the mid 60s. My father stayed behind making money because we needed lots of money to be able to support all of the Scientology training and auditing that she was going through. And so we were there for a few months, and then we were boarded onto the Royal Scotsman. And the Royal Scotsman is the Scientology ship, the original Scientology ship. Before it was the Sea Organization, it was the Sea Project. And
Yep.
so that was Hubbard's initial stages of the Sea Organization. And really, it was because he needed to evade taxes. And he needed to get out to the Mediterranean where those laws did not apply. And that was his way out because they were coming after him in England and the UK.
That's right. This is 1967. This is the greater
Mhm.
part of 1967 is when the C project is established and becomes a thing. And this was the same year that L. Ron Hubbard had been found guilty by the IRS of inurement, meaning he was personally profiting from Scientology. It was not just a nonprofit church entity, and they took the tax exemption away. And this was also following on the heels of years of the British government investigating and being right on the edge of putting a ban on Scientologists coming in because it was just what are these people doing? And there was quite a lot of furor about all of this. And this is the time period we're talking about right now.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for, adding that history. I did not know any of that history until I started writing. And
Right.
so, I quote all of that, the IRS, what they found. And so Hubbard also a piece of that. So we were on the Royal Scotsman, which was the very beginning of that, was that he had to take himself out and he became a writer in seclusion, is what he, labeled himself, so that he was not connected to Scientology. And we've seen Miscavige do exactly the same thing, right? Kind of distance himself in some ways from how does he oversee all of that, even though we know he
Oh,
does.
absolutely. Oh, yeah, because this was also the time when Hubbard said he actually published that he was resigning as the executive director international of Scientology, which he had been running from St. Hill, and that he was turning it all over to the staff there at St. Hill. The organization then was not International Management; it was Scientology Worldwide or Worldwide Management, and this was ostensibly what he did, but he never really stopped running Scientology. No.
So, right, we all know that,
No.
right? Yeah, he was, it's like the Wizard of Oz, right?
That's
Behind
right.
the screen, yeah, behind the curtains.
That's
So,
right.
so we boarded the Royal Scotsman, which is, it's named the Apollo later.
And
After we,
how old were you at this time?
I was 9.
9 years old.
Yeah, yeah.
Hanging around at the beginning of the Sea Org. And how old was your brother?
He's 3 years younger. Yeah.
Wow. So a 6-year old and a 9-year old. So you were one of the kids running around on the boat of the initial days of the Sea Project, Sea Organization. I mean, just
Yes.
wow.
We
Wow.
were. And so it was it was interesting. So we'll sort of put it at that. And as a kid, I write about it, but it's like an adventure because you don't really get it as a kid. So it's like
Oh.
already we'd gone on an adventure to England, and then now we were getting onto this boat in the middle of the night, and so this was another adventure. And we didn't see my mother much at all because she was getting auditing.
Mhm.
She how she decided and how it was decided that we should board the ship. I wish I knew, but I do not. I could not find any records of any of that.
Right.
So it was public Scientologists plus the crew that, Hubbard recruited to sail the ship. So the
Mhm.
maiden voyage is in November and it's 1967, like you said, and it's terrible. It's a terrible maiden voyage. The engine room is not functioning properly. There are all kinds of problems going on. Hannah Eltringham, who was, helping navigate the ship in that initial, maiden voyage, has written about it. So I, provide that in the book also, the quotes from what she's written about that voyage. But as a child, I never knew any of that either. So when I started writing, that was so fascinating for me to kind of put those pieces together because I remember going up to the deck after the initial voyage and we had to clean up because it was a mess. There was water everywhere and we were cleaning up and we were mopping and people were all over. And my mother came and got us and we all had to be up there. LRH wanted everybody up there. Ron wanted everybody up there cleaning up. And he came up to the deck and I remember like wanting some attention because it seemed like, that's what we were all doing to get his attention so that he would approve, of what we were doing. And he walked over to the railing where I was kind of cleaning things off and he looked right past me and right out into the horizon and never spoke to me, never spoke to really anyone, you know. It was very odd. And I remember even as a kid, like thinking, oh, we'll get recognized. He'll be happy. That's what we wanted, to do. So that was very interesting. We were on ship with the Hubbard kids. So we were on the Royal Scotsman with the Hubbard kids, and we were tutored alongside them. There were other kids as well running around, like you said. So come December, though, the Sea organization is starting to become more fully formed.
Mhm.
And that Sea project is morphing into the Sea organization.
Yeah.
And little kids and the public are no longer wanted on the ship. And so we're off boarded. And I learned all of this, just to plug her book, from reading Janice Gillum Grady's Commodore's Messenger, A Child Adrift in the Sea of Scientology.
All right.
And and that's when I learned that she boarded in January and we offboarded in December.
All
So we
right.
were
Just missed each other.
literally ships in the night, right?
Yeah.
Literally, like, yeah. Literally we
That's
were,
right.
yeah, yeah. So that's what happened. So we got off the ship and then we flew home and we're back to the South. And then, my mother is not fixed. She didn't finish, her auditing. She didn't finish the Saint Hill briefing course. And she flies out to Los Angeles.
Mm.
And we stay back with my dad, who's still working, to support all of this. So then my journey begins again in Scientology when we moved to LA.
Mm.
And so we moved to LA, and my mom is very involved in auditing and training. And my dad is working. He's not as involved because probably they couldn't afford to have both of them doing that. Somebody had to be making the money.
Right.
And as a teenager, I become involved in Scientology. So, not to give my whole story away, but my mother has some health issues, my dad has some health issues, and they are no longer able to participate, and I am offered up, is really what happened.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So, and I was 13 when I first started going to the orgs. So, this is again historical in that it's the very beginning of the orgs in Los Angeles.
Mm.
So, the Advanced Organization of Los Angeles,
Hmm.
AOLA, and the Advanced St. Hill Organization, ASHO,
Hmm.
those both, opened up in the 70s. And so
Yeah,
those,
I think 69, 70 is when they're founded. Somewhere
right,
around there. Yeah.
right. So
Yeah.
they become the place to go. St. Hill
Right.
was the place to go. So now California is the place to go. And
Right.
that's where you
Right.
get, the higher levels and the best training and auditing, because now they call it FLAG, which is the sea organization on the ship, right? That FLAG is sending their best. They're sending their best auditors, their best, people to come and populate the orgs
Yeah,
to
of
be.
course they tell people that.
Of course, they tell people that, right?
Yeah, it
Right.
wasn't actually the best, but yes, it
But
was.
that's what
Yes,
they say. Yeah, yeah.
that's right. And
I
this was
have.
partly a response to the pressure on the in the UK on stopping Scientologists from showing up out there. So Hubbard goes, oh well, okay, let's set up shop over in America also and put an advanced org there for the OT levels and this ASHO place to deliver the briefing course because they had only been delivering it at St. Hill in the UK. And so that was part of the reason why these things, actually the main reason why they were set up there in the first place.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
Yeah. So along with that, another project starts, which is Celebrity Center.
All
So
right,
yeah,
right. Janice's mom.
Janice's mom, so Yvonne Gillum Jens, wonderful, lovely woman, is tasked with that. And there's a whole backstory to that people can read about. But she's chosen by L. Ron Hubbard to do that. And sadly, he takes her children on board the ship, doesn't allow her to see them, and then she stays in California, doing the dirty work of Hubbard. So
Yeah.
although there's nothing Yvonne could ever do that would be labeled dirty work because she did everything so well. She did
Yeah,
everything.
she was
Yeah.
such an anomaly in Scientology history because there is literally not one person I've spoken with who knew her. I only knew her through a portrait that hung at Celebrity Center. I never met her. Of course, that portrait's not there anymore. Yvonne has been sort of erased from Scientology history officially, but she is the one who started the Celebrity Center network, and she was one for one regarded as angelic, virtuous, a wonderful person, kind, compassionate, and someone who really was taking the trying to, I guess you could say, enact the best interpretation of Scientology.
Yeah.
Maybe that might be the best way to put that. I guess.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she wholeheartedly believed in the mission of bringing in artists to
Yes.
Scientology
Yep.
to better the world.
That's right.
That was really her, that was the focus, and she embodied it. And so when you walked into Celebrity Center, you felt that. It was palpable. You felt that you were in a good place, that good things were happening there. And there was so much art around. I mean, I was only 13, but I remember they had, poetry by candlelight. So, poets would come in and do these readings, and it was the early 70s. And so that, really fit in. Jeff Levin and Robbie Levin, they were musicians and performed there. And so that was going on. And some very famous, Chick Corea, very famous, musician, he was involved. And so she really found people that were so talented and so artistic and really wanted it to be a hub for that.
Yep.
And along with that, she had to sell Scientology, but it always came across as a positive.
Right.
It didn't feel about the numbers. It didn't feel, that it was that factory of, we've got to get our stats up and all those things that, you hear in Scientology and that were
Right.
happening at the other orgs. So I started at 13, and I always love this story that I started in what they called a dresso. And I think I've told this story before
Mm.
about, it was back when, before everything was online, it was the little Rolodex cards. And so, that's how you had everybody's address, and they would write letters to you. And that's how they contacted people, and continued to promote Scientology to you. So they were meshing the addresso addresses from Aola and Celebrity Center. So she was trying to cross reference those.
Oh, how
And so
interesting. They were
Yeah.
mixing those up. Huh.
Yeah, we're mixing those up. Yeah. So we had these two lines of like a huge Rolodex, and you'd have to
Yeah.
pick up one in one side and look at the name and then see if it was on the other side. So like the most tedious task ever, but I loved it because I she would make you feel like you were doing the most important thing. You know, she would walk through and she would say, you know, how are you? I was another teenager there. How are you doing? You know, it's just so great that you're here helping. You're doing such a great job. I mean, you couldn't not feel good.
Right. Right. Exactly. And this was, I guess this, probably the best way to describe this Addresso thing was it was kind of like a physical database.
Exactly.
Yeah, this is how they used to do it, right? It was like literally when databases went electronic, they were originally thought of as electronic 3x5 card systems. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly like that. So yeah.
yeah.
So I got
Very
involved that
tedious
way.
work.
Very tedious work, right, right. But you know, and I write about this. I was pretty happy there in the beginning. I mean, I felt valued. It was fun. And granted, you know, I was 13, so I was around a lot of young Scientologists, you know, 20, 30s. And in Scientology, the belief is that everyone is a Thetan,
Hmm.
and that as a Thetan, it's like your soul in a way, but you are infinite. You've lived before this lifetime multiple lifetimes, and you'll continue to live more lifetimes, and so you're perceived when you are young, or I was perceived, and this was true on the ship too, as just another Thetan.
Hmm.
You're just in a young body. And I
That's
heard
right.
that a lot, you know, that. And so there wasn't this restriction, you know, and I know your story too of getting involved in Scientology when you were a teenager, you know, that feeling of empowerment, right?
Oh, very much so. Even as a kid being raised around it at the Pasadena Mission, right? Just running around and everybody's like, "Oh yeah, you're so powerful, you're so amazing, you're so wonderful," right? And it was very ego boosting.
Right. Right. Especially as a teenager, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
So you know, I took the courses, the communication course and all the courses and did all of that. And I was there from the time I was 13 until when I was 16. And so, you know, I went to school. So I was there in the summers and in the evenings and on the weekends. That's when I, you know, participated. But I became an auditor. And you know, I received auditing and I became an auditor. And I had memories of it, Chris, you know, with the writing of it, but I'd kind of like always thought to myself, like, I don't think that could be. Like, how could that be? You know, I was so young. And then as I started to write, I'm like, no, I was an auditor. Like I did. Like I had, you know, what they call pre-clear. So the people that are trying to, you know, get better and better and become clear, which is Scientology's term of, you know, erasing all the bad things in your reactive mind, right? So you become more powerful. But I remember, you know, and sitting with people across the table, holding their cans, you know, asking them the questions, writing it down dutifully, giving the folders to the case supervisor. I mean, I did all of that as a
Yeah.
teenager,
Yeah.
which is kind of wild.
Oh, yeah, I agree completely. I went through some similar things and learn how to use the e-meter and doing these sessions and keeping all these workshops. I mean, there's so much procedure. And after a
Exactly.
while, it becomes secondhand. You do it for, hundreds of hours. It's like, okay, whatever. But at the beginning, it's also new and different and sort of procedural, and you're so not wanting to get anything wrong, right? You want to get all the commas right and you draw the line straight and do all the different things and keep
Right.
track of all the little things you're supposed to keep track of with the meter and the person, and are they
Yeah.
good indicators, are they very good indicators, what's going on over there? And oh man, it was, yeah, it was and you really felt like you were learning this this I guess like probably how doctors think about, when they start, or nurses or something, when you're learning these healing arts and you're learning something new, and it's, like how to draw blood or something. It's like all this, at first you're bumbling around, and then after, a while you're doing it secondhand, you can do it in your sleep. But at the beginning it's also exciting. It's all, ooh, look what I can do. Look what I've got this power to do now. And I don't want to mess it up, but ooh, look what I can do. I don't know. That was kind of
Yeah.
my memories
Yeah.
of that.
I like that analogy. Yeah. It's like
Mm.
a secret language. That's how I
Yeah,
kind of felt. Like it was this
yeah,
secret language. And I had totally forgotten about how you have to draw the line, Chris. I
yeah.
forgot about that. So funny.
Right down the middle of the page, you got it because you,
I
you
told,
keep these
I,
worksheets, right?
yes, I totally forgot
Yeah,
about that. Oh my
yeah.
gosh. Yeah. Oh, I wish I'd remembered that. I could have put that in the book. Um, I write about it, but I forgot about that part. Um, so anyway, and there were some times when, and I don't want to give them away, but in the book, there were some instances where the adults sitting across the table from me were revealing things that were not okay,
Hmm.
that were
Hmm.
not okay. And I didn't get it. I was too naive. I was too young to really understand the impact of their actions. And that
Yeah.
has bothered me, for a very long time. And I write about that. And I think part of that is that how dismissed it was when I reported it. So I reported exactly, because that's what you do. You have to write down exactly what they're telling you, right?
Yeah.
And you have to, make sure that it's correct and it's what they're saying, and you're recording what the needle on the e-meter is saying and all of that. And so turning that in, I was then questioned about it. And I didn't understand why I was being questioned about it. And I felt like I'd done something wrong and all of that, those feelings. And then, the pre-clear, the person was taken away from me, and they
Mm.
were, and I don't know what happened. I don't know. I
Mm.
didn't see them anymore, at the org and all of that. And so I think that it was just another example of Scientology burying anything that, didn't report a win, didn't report something positive.
Oh,
you know
sure. Oh, sure.
it was not okay, for
Right.
anything to be revealed that would be illegal, or detrimental, to others.
That's
So,
right. Well,
yeah. So,
especially if it was stuff that they were doing in the here and now. Scientology is
mhm,
all about digging up your criminal past and sort of having that on record against you. But when it comes to, things that are happening in the here and now, if you're like, yeah, I robbed a house last night or something, they're going to be like, wait a minute, you did what? They don't, they're very, very wary of that kind of thing. And of course, that sort of thing comes up all the time. So,
right,
yeah.
right. And it was the 70s, so things were a little more lax during that
Mm.
period of time.
Hmm.
Once the Sea Org was really established, as they didn't want anybody having kids. They didn't want, any of that premarital sex going on.
That's right.
It was on the straight and narrow. And so you had to get married, to be able to even do that, right?
That's
But you
right.
couldn't have any kids. So this was in the 70s where it was a little bit more lax. And so people were shacking up, and there was all kinds of that happening. And
Right.
so there was a lot more leeway, I think, with that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. The whole 2D rules thing, the issue that where Hubbard said no more premarital sex, no heavy petting, none of that with Sea Org members, I think is 1977 or 78 when that's issued. So prior to that, I mean, I've heard stories. It
Yeah,
was, not full blown orgies on the boat, but,
I
a
know.
lot of people sleeping around with a lot of other people and just kind of, shacking up over here, shacking up over there and whatever, it's the 70s.
Yeah, yeah. So you can read about that in the book too. There's some of that. So then, I was getting older, so I was an auditor, doing that, like I said, summers, weekends, evenings.
But you
And
were not a Sea Org member. You were still a public person, just being at the org, doing class work, doing auditing work as a young Scientologist.
exactly,
Yeah. Okay.
exactly, and it's so interesting because it's Celebrity Center, and I thought about that also until the, I call it, the suits came in. So like I remember when they sent, and maybe you'll remember him, Ron Pook, who was a case supervisor. He was on
Hmm.
the ship. So they sent him and his girlfriend, and they came to Celebrity Center, and they were
Mm.
in the uniforms. And that was the first time I remember seeing the uniforms and not really
Um,
knowing like, whoa, they wear uniforms. Like that was really not the case at Celebrity Center, everybody
right.
was plain clothes. And then that's when also and I didn't write about this in the book, but I remember it that and what would they call them? You know, would know better than I, Chris. The ecclesiastical ministers, is that what they called them? They would wear the collars,
Oh, sure. Yeah. Just wearing
like a priest collar with
yeah, the
the
priest
black
collar.
and
That
the and the
some
little
people
white part that went there, yeah, on the neck.
yeah, the dog. They've been known as the dog collar, which is you can find that on Wikipedia. It's not it's not like some put down. It's just what the thing is
That's what
called.
they call
Yeah.
them. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, and that was part of making Scientology more reputable, in that they
Yeah.
were ecclesiastical ministers or something. I
Yeah.
think that was the terminology. Yeah. So
That's
you did
right.
see a little bit of that. I remember Bob Riggs was the one at Celebrity Center. So anyway, so I was not Sea Org. And so that was really starting to take hold. They started,
Hmm.
sending people over, and there was a huge push to join the Sea Org. And that's when things started to change over. And so I was 15, 16, and I had gotten involved in, more mainstream teenage things, dating and going to dances and, all of those things that you do when you're a teenager. And so I hadn't been around the org for a while, maybe
Hmm.
a good like 6 months. And so we lived in an apartment not far from Ash Show, and these two guys show up at my door from Celebrity Center. And I open the door, and it's just me, and my mom's at work, and my boyfriend is there. And so I don't invite them in, but they stand at the door, and they ask me, where you been? It's like, well, you know, been, I don't really know what to say. It's kind of obvious. I have a boyfriend. And so I said, oh, I just haven't been around. And then they said, yeah, yeah, you need to come back, and telling me what I need to do. And, you need to get, back to doing this. And I just kind of listen. And then I don't invite them in, and they just stood there. And I think if, I hadn't had somebody else there, they might have strong armed a little bit more,
Oh,
that
sure.
they might have pushed in. And so prior to that, I had been given the really hard sell to join the Sea Org the last time I had
Mm.
been at the org. And I
Mm.
had come home, and I had told my mom, I'm going to join. I'm ready. I was a teenager, rebellious. I wanted to get, away. Um, and I started packing my bag. And my mom and I had this really blowout fight. And she said to me, if you join, I'm going to call the police. If you try to do that, I'm going to call the police. And yeah, and I was
Mom's
terrified.
saving your life.
She did. I dodged a bullet.
Yeah.
I dodged a bullet.
Yeah.
And she would have, I think she would have. I really do. Um,
Wow.
I wasn't willing to test that. I believed that she really might. And I think I was still a little on the fence. I had gotten I dipped my toe into normal teenage things,
Good.
and those were starting to feel better than what I was doing at the org. Those were more interesting to me, than what I was
Right.
doing at the orgs. And so I didn't join,
That's
I
good.
luckily I didn't join, and that was the last time, that I encountered Scientologists that way. And so then I lived my life, but I shut that door.
Right.
I shut it. My mother, she shut it somewhat, for the most part. I learned later, in the writing of my book and researching, that she actually was dating a Scientologist towards the end of her life, Dawn Breeding, who was one of the.
Your mom was dating Dawn Breeding?
She was. She
How
was.
interesting. He was one of the people instrumental in the creation of the e-meter.
Exactly.
How interesting.
Yeah,
How
and I never
interesting.
knew that either. So I learned so much,
Right.
in the writing of the
Right.
book, and so she she never really disconnected, and I think in she disconnected from the orgs, and she disconnected from that, but she never disconnected from that belief system.
Sure, sure. And not an uncommon thing for some Scientologists who still hold on to the beliefs, but they find, something wrong, distasteful, just annoying, or worse about going down to the church and being harangued for money or being harangued to join the Sea Org or get on staff or do this or do that. There's all these pressures. And so I don't know what if that was the situation with your mom. I'm just sort of
Very
commenting in
much so.
general that was, kind of, yeah, I kind of like what Hubbard had to write about, and I think that's cool, and I like thinking about life that way, but I don't, I don't want to. And your mom had been all the way to the top. I mean, she had been on the boat with Hubbard. I mean, she had been at the highest level you can get as far as a public person paying for and doing the ultimate Scientology services in the best place you can go to do them. I mean, she was around Hubbard in Hubbard's world, so to speak. So it wasn't like somebody could say, well, they did it all wrong. I mean, come on, she was all the way at the top, She went to heaven and then she came back and
Yes.
she's like, yeah, it wasn't that great.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's true. And I think because of that connection with Hubbard is probably why we were on the ship, honestly. I think
Yeah,
that it probably had something, to do with that.
yeah,
Um, but she also, you know, didn't do well with OT levels. And I don't want to give everything away in my book, but
sure.
she had some issues with that, as some people do,
Yeah,
and so she had a difficult time with it, and she became a problem. If you were to think of it in Scientology terms, like this is somebody who's not achieving the level that we want. She's not doing it correctly. She's having issues, as she goes up the OT levels. And I think she kind of got shuffled around
yeah.
because of that.
Yeah,
And
no, it can be hard. I remember when I worked at AOLA, and earlier than that was overseeing delivery of the OT levels from a management perspective that, I can only say this in hindsight because I didn't really think about it this way when I was in, but there are more than you might imagine. There are people who hit those OT levels and just go, wait a minute, what? And just bounce. And they don't want to have anything to do with that. Or they hit it and they just get very, very confused about it. And it doesn't fit for them as smoothly as it does for other Scientologists. And they become this sort of, as Hubbard calls them, flat ball bearings, this kind of like, they don't roll. They just stick there. And people try to do this repair and that repair and this and that. And eventually, if that kind of stuff doesn't work before too long, they get labeled as an ethics case. And then it's, well, you're just not there's just something wrong with you. You're just out ethics or something. And, because they can't fix you. And so you must be the broken problem. And so, and they just kind of get rid of you.
it's so sad. It's so very sad. So yeah, my mom had some psychosis, going through the OT levels, and then
Mm,
she suffered from agoraphobia, and it was very sad. It was
mhm.
very sad for her. It didn't have the outcome, like you said,
Yeah.
that they wanted to happen, and for her, sadly, that didn't happen.
Yeah.
And so I think also, she'd run out of money because my dad had become sick, and so he was no longer working, and so she really couldn't afford, Scientology anymore. And I think
Right.
she did hold on to those beliefs from the beginning days, like that was still her belief system.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure she could really ever align after that, even though she tried.
Sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think that
Absolutely.
was
Well,
her.
there is also that other factor that the OT levels and Scientology auditing at the lower levels can introduce factors that can destabilize a person's mental health and exacerbate mental health issues. Not just it sometimes create out of nothing, right? Certainly narcissistic tendencies, things like that. But it can also exacerbate existing situations and make something that might not be life threatening or life altering and turn it into something like that. And we've seen, and John Atack has commented on the fact that there are mental health institutions and hospitals around the St. Hill, England area where quite regularly Scientologists end up showing up there because they got from the OT levels. You know.
So sad. So very
Very.
sad.
That's the real damage that not the only damage. I don't mean to put it that way, but just it's a very, very, very unfortunate consequence of Scientology that really probably doesn't get looked at hard enough.
Right, right. And then that coupled with, and that was one of the things that I, had to come to terms with in the writing of my book. And so that's really the premise and the introduction is were my parents, predestined to have some of the pathologies that they had in life? Or was Scientology, the catalyst that maybe
Right.
activated those
Right.
and stirred those up? And so, it's really a chicken or the egg dilemma. You don't know. I can't know.
No, it's
I
it's
really
hard. It's a hard question, but we know it ain't helping.
it didn't no, it didn't help. It didn't help.
No.
And and in Scientology, I mean, that's the other belief, which is so very sad, is that people believe in Scientology that if there's something wrong with you, a physical illness, a mental illness, that there's something you're doing to make that happen. There's something that you have done, an overt, which is something that you've done to somebody or something, right? Or a withhold, some secret that you have, something that you're doing, that's causing you harm. And then you spend money, many dollars, hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars, trying to figure out what that is and to fix that. And you're not getting the help that you need. You're not getting the mental health you need, and you're not getting, the physical health that you might, the doctor's visits, whatever you need. You're not getting anything diagnosed. I think that's a better way to put it. You're not being diagnosed properly
That's
for what
right.
ails you.
That's right. That's a truly tragic aspect of Scientology because it ends up putting people into a headspace where they feel they are responsible for their own condition with things like cancer and other physical ailments, chronic physical problems, chronic mental health issues that maybe you did something to exacerbate or precipitate that condition, but probably not. These things just happen. Bodies are kind of not perfect things, and there's genetic dispositions, and there's environmental factors, and there's toxins and various things. And despite Scientology's bullshit, the sweating it out in a sauna ain't how you're going to detox your body, and on and on and on. So there's just like all these sort of false foundational beliefs that Scientology kind of dumps on people, and then they adopt it and go through their life blaming themselves for things that have nothing to do with anything they ever actually caused to happen. And this can really derange people. This can really get people into very, very odd ways of thinking and acting because they think it's all on them and they just haven't confessed enough, or they just haven't looked introverted, hard enough, or they haven't found the thing in their auditing or something. And they will pay and pay and pay more to Scientology to get more and more and more of this false bullshit laid on them, and end up, dying of cancer when they, had they gone to a doctor and got regular medical checkups, they could have detected it 10 years ago and done something about it. But Scientology never pushes that.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Mhm.
So, sadly, so both of my parents succumbed. I mean, my mother later in life, but, my father died of multiple sclerosis, and he was diagnosed during that period of time in the 70s. And because of his belief system, that Scientology, you just explained all of it, that Scientology dictates, he didn't seek medical, advice. He really didn't. He did a little bit because of the need to be able to figure out how to use a wheelchair and some rehabilitation that way. he did do that. And I think
Mhm.
that was with my mother's push, to get him to do that. And he was able to work for a brief period of time, disabled, but he ended up in a convalescent home, and he ended up in a
Yeah.
hospital dying. And I know that he did not take any of the drugs, and there were less drugs at that time for multiple sclerosis, but I know that he didn't take any of the drugs because of his beliefs.
Right. Exactly. And that's so you become, in a way, your own worst advocate and your own worst enemy, and it's very tragic. It's very sad.
Yeah. So, and he was the truest believer. I mean, he was an original clear, back in the 50s,
I
you
mean, going
know.
back to Wichita days, we are talking original. This is 1951,
Well, he
like
wasn't that
yeah.
original. So he was, but in between 57 and 59, I want to say it was 59 that he received his clear bracelet. So there
Oh, yeah,
were
yeah. No, I'm just
to
saying
the
in terms of
hat.
his involvement with it,
Involvement, right,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
absolutely.
exactly. No, yeah, he
Yeah.
was involved from the beginning. So, he was the true believer. And so he was the one that kept my family rolling, with Scientology in
Right.
spite of everything that was happening. So I got out, and I didn't join. And then I lived my life and really had shut the door on it. Just really shut the door. I didn't want to think about it. My mom was not involved in it anymore. My dad was gone. He had died. And so I lived my life. I had a family, I had a career, had all those things. And then about 15 years ago, I had a traumatic event happen in my life, and some memories started to get activated. And these memories were not necessarily of Scientology. I suffered from some sexual abuse. So there was some incest with my father that I started
Mm,
to remember.
mm.
And yeah, and that was, it was all hard. It was hard, of course, it was hard, but it was also, in a way, like a door had been opened for me, Chris, because I always had this memory when I was of being a little child and sitting on my dad's lap and him telling me about the secret we had to keep. And
Mm.
I always had that memory, but I never could figure out what the secret was, and it
Wow.
haunted me. It haunted me,
Yeah.
for a long time. And, I'd been to therapy, I'd been to all kinds of things, and I'd never had any memories. So I'd never really talked about it and addressed it. So it opened
Right.
that door for me to be able to deal with it, which is the good
Right.
news. Because I was traumatized. I didn't even know I was traumatized.
Yeah, and that's kind of the nature of trauma sometimes, is it just shuts it down and it's gone.
Right. Yeah. So I didn't even know.
Yeah.
I had issues in my life, but I didn't know that's what was causing those.
Yeah.
And, I started to, like I said, delve into that in therapy a little bit, but really just a very little bit. More memories came. And then at the same time that those memories came, I started writing about just my childhood and saw the overlap with Scientology. And, like remembering when we were in England, it's like, oh, yeah, that was about Scientology. Remembering when we were on the ship, oh, yeah, that was about Scientology. And really starting to connect the dot and to
Right.
put those pieces of the puzzle together. And
Right.
that was a lot of work, a lot of digging. Thank goodness for Tony Ortega's website.
Yeah, talk about an encyclopedia of Scientology information and memories. Jesus.
Lots of good stuff there,
Yeah.
and I did the deep dive, that people who leave Scientology do. And there was tons. I mean, you could go down that rabbit hole and still be there. There's just so much information there. So I had to do it a little at a time and kind of digest what I was reading and trying to see where my parents were in that and see what I could find out. But really, I just learned so much about the chronology of Scientology that I didn't know. Even though I'd
Right.
lived it, I really didn't know it.
Right.
And so that was interesting, and I include that in the book. But my story is told from my perspective as a child. So
Hmm.
it's a memoir. It's a true story, but it reads a bit like fiction in that it's a story. It's the
And I
story
thought
of
it was
my.
well told. I
Oh,
thought your approach was good with it. It was intriguing.
no, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I was very, wow, this is really well told.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
It was a long time figuring out the vehicle. It took a lot of editing to figure out what was the best way to tell that story, to tell my
Yeah.
story. And so working
Mm.
with editors, that's what finally evolved. And I'm glad it did. I had wanted to publish so many years earlier. It's taken me 10 years to get to this place. And I thought I'd put it all down and I was ready, to spill the beans. And it wasn't ready. It wasn't ready. And it needed to be told in my voice. And so it's
Yeah.
very much told in my voice and what I lived and those connections with Scientology. And, in working with one of the editors, I loved the way that she guided me. She said, so she got it. She said, so Scientology was always this shadow in your life. Like sometimes it was this really big shadow, that you couldn't see anything else because you were so enmeshed in it. And other times, it lifted a little bit and you could see some other light and some other things, but the shadow was always there. And so
Yeah.
she said, in writing it, you need to convey that of how Scientology was that thread, that was through your life, your entire childhood, and into your adulthood. And that
Wow.
helped me a lot.
Absolutely. No, that's good. That's a good simile.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, yeah. It was good advice.
Yeah, it's good. Exactly.
It's
Yeah, it's
it
good
was
description.
feedback. So yeah.
Yeah. Pardon me, English majors out there, if I've just butchered what a simile is. Yeah. Well, anyway, I'm really glad that you took the time to do this and put it all out there. And what an interesting journey.
It has been. It has been, and it's been a healing journey that I didn't ever know I needed to take.
Hmm.
Because of
Yeah.
the trauma. I really didn't
Yeah.
know how much I needed to heal from all of that until those doors
Yeah.
started opening and I started going, through them to remember.
Yeah.
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 So
Memory is wild that way, isn't it? How it sort of you get peaks of things here and there, or sometimes it only comes out through dreams, like I mean, just these kind of or feelings because you can't quite get the picture or the memory or however it is people remember things because I know not everybody has the visual of it, but
right.
however it manifests for us, it's always there. It's just we can't always necessarily see it for what it is. And that's that whole body keeps the score concept, right, of trauma. Bessel van der Kolk's book. And it was very revealing of that and how it really never went anywhere. It's just, it kind of buries itself sometimes, sometimes in a way, it's sort of like it feels like it just seeps into your cells or something. It's not a picture or a memory. It's something that just kind of is in you, and sometimes it comes out.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
an excellent book. Yeah. At the end of my book, because of the healing journey that I had to take or that I chose
Yeah.
to take because of the sexual abuse, coupled with, being a cult survivor, that connection with Scientology. I put a resource list in the back of the book. So there's a resource list for Scientologists, people who are leaving the cult of Scientology if they want to learn more about it. There's some of those seminal works and other memoirs that have been written. And then there's the Aftermath Foundation, the Michael J. Rinder Aftermath Foundation, which is doing, a great job of supporting people who are leaving Scientology and
Yeah.
especially people leaving the Sea Org. And that was so important to me because I didn't join. And I think I realize now, as a someone in their sixth decade of life, like, oh my God, that would have been such a different life. If I had joined, my life would have been so incredibly different. And I'm so thankful, that I didn't that day and that my
Oh
mom
my goodness.
was able to stop me. So a portion of the proceeds from the sale of my book will go to the Aftermath Foundation.
Awesome. Awesome. Oh, that's great. That's great. Good. That's great.
Yeah, yeah. I had to
Um,
have some
yeah.
purpose with it. I healed, or I'm healing, continuing to heal through the writing. But then I really needed to have more purpose there of how could I give back? How could I do something to help others? Hopefully reading the book helps you, if you are
Yeah.
a survivor, and you'll connect and it'll resonate with you, a cult survivor or a sexual abuse survivor. But I also want to help to continue the work of the aftermath. It's so important.
Oh, great. Well, I could not agree with you more. Doing work for the aftermath directly myself, I am a little biased, but yeah, it's a great group, and I get to see on the like right in front of me, I get to see the benefits that people get from contacting and working with the aftermath and the help that we get to give, and it is important work. So let me echo what you're saying right now on that. It's important stuff, and so that's great. So by buying your book and reading it, you're supporting the aftermath as well, which is great because it is probably I'll say it's the number one vehicle for assisting people to have a support framework or a support system in place that they can go to or access, lacking anything else, trying to come out of that cult. And it can be rough to come out without a support network. It can be impossible to come out without a support network. So I'm glad we have that there for them. What are you thinking in terms of you going to continue writing? Do you have other aspirations in that direction now, or was it just kind of a one and done? I wanted to get this out there, or how are you approaching this?
People ask me that a lot. I think I have another story, but I don't know.
Okay.
I'm still working, and so I'm an educator, so I'm still in the world of education and still living my life. So this has been it's a lot of work. Being a writer is a lot of work,
Isn't
and
it?
it's a lot of work. It is. I mean,
Yeah,
it's cathartic. It's a great experience, but it's far more work than anyone ever thinks it will be.
that's
If
right.
you haven't written, and so then I've learned that the publishing, world of publishing is a whole nother, journey, and how to get all that done. So I'm glad that I've jumped through all of those hoops. And I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what the future brings. You never know. You never know
Fair
what will
enough.
happen next. Yeah,
Fair
yeah.
enough.
But I do. I feel successful, I guess, maybe accomplished is the best word,
Yeah.
in that I never, in the beginning, when I started writing, never set out to write my story. It was just to get it out. I was having these memories and I needed to just get it all out on paper. And so that process, the more I did it, the more I realized there's a story here.
Yeah.
There's really a story, and I need to tell that for myself, and I need to tell that to hopefully help others that have gone
Absolutely.
through
Yeah,
something similar.
absolutely. I yeah, I want to encourage people out there to put pen and paper or type or whatever, however you're going to do it. Um, I really do encourage people to do that if you're capable or able to do that. Some people are like, and it's like fine, 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 fine. There's nothing wrong with you if you can't or you don't want to. But for those of you who have an itch or an inkling to journal or write things down, it is really surprising where it can go. That's the thing that always impresses me about the process of writing is how you'll start thinking it's going to go in one direction or one thing's going to happen or even some kind of a this isn't very helpful or useful, and you just kind of push a little bit and you persist a bit, and it is work. Don't think of it as recreational activity because it's kind of not.
No.
Uh, and nor when you think about what it can do for you, it truly like becomes not a recreational, like yeah, this is going to be some work, but boy, the gains, the benefits you can get from it, the can be, the rewards can be unpredictable. You didn't see it coming.
And it's scary to start. It's scary to write. It's scary to put it down on paper. And I
Yeah.
think that's what it kept me, from doing it for a very long time. Because if I write about it, if I put it down on paper, then it becomes real, and it becomes something that I have to start owning. Like this really
Yeah.
happened. And that was very hard. That was very hard in writing down the memories, the sexual abuse, and then all the things that happened in my family with Scientology, and
Yeah.
and actually memorializing them on paper. So that's been very, very hard. So I will share this, and I'll just show it to you. So I got the proof book. So there's my proof book. Clearly Lies Are True. See all that? Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So when it
Nice.
came though, um, it was so hard, Chris, to even open it. I was terrified. I mean, I'd worked with, the editor and layout and everything, so I knew exactly what was in there and what it was going to look like. But now it was real.
Yep.
Now all of that was real. And so it's taken, it took me a minute to really own it and to look through it and, to say, okay, yeah, this is the story, and here it is. And my husband, through all of this, has been incredibly supportive, but he I did not share my writing with him for many years. When I was first started writing, I had to even keep it a secret. I really, I couldn't, it was too
Wow.
raw. I couldn't share it. And so,
Sure.
finally I started sharing it with him. And so he's read it now. And that's been hard in that it's one thing for, for you to read it, or, people who buy it and don't know me to read it, but it's something different for your family to read it, for someone who's so close to you. And part of that is there's things in there that I know will be hard and that were hard. That was why I didn't want him to read it. Hard for him to read about me, things that happened to me,
Yeah.
because he's my husband, he's protective and he loves me. So, and for family. So I think that's one piece that you go through as a writer also is you need to tell your story. It has to be told, but then you're afraid that people are going to read it. Kind of a weird,
Yeah. Yeah.
thing. But
It's
but
yeah,
it's
it's true. It's true. And there's a lot of potential judgment and various things that, can come from all of that. I get that for sure. It's exciting. It's but it's scary. It's a scary thing. I'll never forget when I got my book in my hand for the first time. I was like, I can't believe I did this. I mean, it's just, because it's one thing to, you design the book and you figure the book
right.
out and you lay it all out and you do all that, but it's all on a computer screen or something. And, or it's in a typewriter and then you actually go get it published and it shows up and you're like, ah, I did this. Ah, and then you're gonna, oh man, what are other people gonna think when oh my God, yeah, it's heady,
It is. It is. Yeah. It's not something that, I expected. I was surprised by that. I thought that
right?
yeah, I thought that, oh, okay, great. It came. And actually, my husband handed it to me and I was like, oh, I don't want to open it. I don't want to look at it. It took me a minute. So, but I'm feeling more confident and more comfortable with it. The other thing that I've, learned to be more comfortable with is sharing on social media
Hmm.
about my story. And that's where, I started, was dipping my toe in it with Tony Ortega's, the Underground Bunker. And he was gracious enough 4 years ago to first post my story.
Mhm.
And then, like you said, he's just posted it again because now the book is out. It took me a while to get there. But that's been a journey as well, to be
Yeah.
on, Instagram and TikTok and have a website and have places where people can get to know more about me and the story and to put it out there publicly. And that can be scary for cult survivors, for sexual abuse survivors. That's another realm that, feels frightening.
Oh, I absolutely, absolutely, because you're kind of putting yourself out there as a public figure, and and in today's world, especially, even more so than in times past, that can have, unintended consequences, and that can be really, really scary because you don't know what's going to happen, and the world can be a very judgy place. And it can also just not get it and not understand or, think they understand and but they really don't, and you do your best. You try to put the words down and hope people get it. But, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And it's just, okay, here we go. I'm going to put myself out there now. It's a huge, huge step. I don't know in our, social media age that everybody appreciates what a big step it is.
Well said. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah. And it's become, that's the way we market things now in the world.
Mhm.
Is through social media. And so when I was given that advice that if I really want someone to read my story, I'm going to have to publicize it. I'm going to have to talk about it. I'm going to have to, you know, create a vehicle for that. And I was very adverse to that, very adverse to that. I mean, I had not gone on social media throughout my whole adult life. I didn't want to be on it. I didn't want
Mhm.
anybody to know except the people that my friends that I knew, and I didn't have to see them on social media. I could see them in person. So that
Yeah.
was a huge leap for me. I'm feeling more comfortable and confident with it, but it's huge. It really
Yeah.
is huge. And also the fear of any repercussions from Scientology. I have not had any, and I don't anticipate any. I mean, I'm such a small fish in the big sea. you
I
know,
mean,
uh,
so am I still. So like whatever, it's like that's exactly right. Right. I don't think we have a lot to fear from them from what we're doing.
I don't think so either.
Yeah.
Um, but I think we have to continue to speak out. And I
Yeah.
think that's the important piece
That's
that
right.
people need to know that that's the reason we're doing it, that it's not, for our own fame or for our own, narcissistic recognition or anything like that. It's about making sure people continue to hear about it and
That's right.
that doesn't go away, that doesn't get erased because so many things, like you said, in Scientology get erased. People are erased. Yvonne Gillum Jentz is erased. People that don't fit in anymore to their message and the direction that they want to go, they're trying to get rid of, their voices.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, because that's what cults do.
It's exactly right what cults
Yeah.
do. So, it's still a very insidious cult and it still preys on people. And I'm so glad that you're doing that work with the aftermath. And I just want people to know that that's a place that they can go to, to get the help that they need when they're coming out. And the ex-Scientology community, I just want to speak to this also, I have learned is such a welcoming, talented group of individuals. I was amazed with all of the ex-Scientologists that I've met, through the course of writing and being on podcasts. I'm just so impressed with the work that all of the ex-Scientologists that I know are doing and putting themselves out there, to keep that message going. And again, it's not for their fame. It's not for the money, right, Chris? It's not for the
It's definitely not for the money.
right.
No.
Yeah.
No, it's about helping people
It's
and that's and there are some wonderful actors, wonderful speakers, wonderful people in this space.
right.
There really, really are. And thank you for seeing that and saying that um because I found a lot of welcome, when I first got out um and made friends that I, still have to this day. So yeah, so good stuff. Well, Pam, we're going to go ahead and move toward wrapping up here. We've covered a lot of territory here, and I want people to know that book's out there now. Where do they find it? How do they get hold of it?
So right now, the best place to find it is on Amazon.
Okay.
So you just can Google "Clearly Lies Are True," and it's out in an ebook, it's out in a paperback book, and it's an Audible in my own voice.
Yes, I was going to recommend if you didn't do the Audible, do it. Yes, that is awesome because you'll be surprised how many people consume audiobooks, and that you will continue to get, traction through the audio even more so than through the published work. At least that's been my experience, and I'm really glad I did that audiobook. So I'm really glad you did too, especially in your voice,
It was hard. It
isn't
was
it?
it was
It's a
it was
thing,
hard.
huh?
It was harder than writing. It was one thing to write it, and it's another thing to speak it. Yeah,
Yep.
it was really emotional. And then also because you're in the voiceover booth, and so you're in this little claustrophobic box, telling your story, and that's just taxing. But I am glad I did it. I am glad I did it also as an
Yeah.
Audible. So hopefully that resonates with people as well. However you like to consume your books. Yeah.
Yeah.
But but my hope is that it does resonate, and I my hope is that those that choose to read it find something in it that they can take away that will help them, either
Awesome.
give them a sense of empathy for cult survivors, sexual abuse survivors, or maybe a connection that they might have, that will help them on their journey.
Big time. Absolutely. Because these things, we tend to find that these memoirs and these stories resonate with people from other groups
Hmm.
and sometimes even wake people up who are in other groups who aren't aware that they're in a group. Meaning, they don't know they're in a cult. They obviously know they're in a group, but, uh, and so sometimes sharing these things can be quite have interesting results for people in other cultic situations. So, all right, Pam. Well, thank you again for taking the time to show up on my show here and share your story. And I believe me, I get it. The vulnerability and the sort of like trepidation of doing this is real. So I'm glad that you did step up, you did do this, and you're putting yourself out there. I think it matters, and I hope it will help people.
Oh, thank you so much, Chris. I always love talking to you, and I really appreciate you having me on your podcast.
Not a problem at all. Wishing you all the success with this thing, and keep me in the loop on what's happening with it.
I certainly will. And I'll let you know
Awesome.
if I write my next book.
Yes, please. Absolutely. You're good. So that I would like to see that. There are links below, folks, to the Amazon page where the book is available and to her website. So check those out. And on that happy note, we'll go ahead and wrap up the show here for this week. Thank you very much for coming around and listening to us gabber on at a mad rate. Always appreciate the viewership. Share, like, get it around, do all the things, subscribe to the channel, all of that. And of course, you can support the channel too through Patreon, PayPal, whatever. Links below in the description section here. So you can show me some love as well. All right. I will see you guys next week. Bye bye.
Thanks, Chris.